Have you ever stared at a patch of dry, cracked dirt in your backyard and wondered why, despite hours of back-breaking digging, watering, and fertilizing, your tomato plants still look miserable? What if I told you that all that hard work is exactly what is killing your garden? Welcome back to the channel, fellow soil enthusiasts. Today, we are going to look at a method that completely defies modern gardening advice. We are going to explore a forgotten technique from the 19th century that can bring completely dead soil back to life in just 60 days. And the most shocking part is that you will not need a tiller. You will not need bags of expensive compost, and you definitely will not need to break a sweat. All you need is a piece of dead wood. I know it sounds absolutely crazy to bury a piece of raw wood right next to your delicate vegetables. Most garden centers will tell you that wood steals nutrients from the soil. But today, I am going to prove them wrong and show you how this one lazy trick will help you harvest 3 times as many vegetables while you sit back in your lawn chair. Are you ready to find out why the old farmers were actually geniuses? Let us dig in without actually digging. Before we get to the exact steps of this 60-day transformation, we need to take a quick trip back to the 19th century. Back then, peasant farmers in Eastern Europe did not have access to synthetic liquid fertilizers, soil testing kits, or heavy machinery. They had to rely entirely on observing nature to survive. They noticed that the most lush, green, and vibrant plants in the wild always grew on the edges of forests, right over fallen, decaying logs. They realized that rotting wood was not garbage, but actually a battery holding massive amounts of stored energy, water, and life. This observation birthed early forms of mound culture. But there was also a lesser-known, highly localized method for flat gardens. Instead of building huge, labor-intensive mounds, they developed a micro-strategy using single wooden stakes driven deep into exhausted soil. Biologically speaking, wood is pure carbon, but its true magic lies in its cellular structure. Under a microscope, wood looks like a bundle of tiny straws. When you put it in the ground, it stops being just a stick and becomes a biological sponge. It becomes a permanent house for the microscopic workers that actually feed your plants. So let us look at exactly how this hidden system works and how you can replicate it in your own modern garden today. Let us start by addressing the biggest elephant in your garden shed, which is the rototiller. The myth of deep digging has ruined more gardens than pests ever could. When you fire up a tiller and chop up the topsoil, you might think you are making it nice and fluffy for your seeds. But what you are actually doing is running a hurricane through a thriving underground city. Soil is not just dirt. It is a complex web of fungal threads, bacteria, and microscopic tunnels built by earthworms. When you slice all of that up, the soil structure collapses. The beneficial microbes die off from exposure to the sun, and the worms flee. The soil becomes a dead, dusty powder that turns into hard concrete as soon as it rains. The 19th century wooden stake technique completely bypasses this destruction. By driving a stake into the ground, you are essentially opening a single, clean elevator shaft into the deep layers of the earth. You are delivering food and moisture straight to the root zone without disturbing the established communities around it. It is the ultimate lazy approach to aeration, allowing the soil to breathe naturally while keeping the fragile fungal networks completely intact. So, What exactly is this forgotten wooden stake technique? In its simplest form, it involves driving a thick, unpainted, untreated piece of raw wood straight down into the center of your vegetable bed or right next to a struggling fruit tree. Think of it like acupuncture for your garden. You are not mixing wood chips all over the surface, which can temporarily lock up nitrogen. Instead, you are placing a concentrated pillar of carbon deep into the earth. As soon as this stake is in the ground, it begins to draw moisture from the surrounding soil. But more importantly, it becomes a beacon for the decomposers because the stake is vertical. It bridges the gap between the oxygen-rich surface layer and the deep, mineral-rich subsoil. It creates a vertical highway for microbes to travel up and down. Over the course of 60 days, the outer layer of this stake begins to soften and break down. As it rots, it slowly releases carbon, which feeds the bacteria, which in turn feed your plants. It is a slow-drip energy system that works entirely out of sight, providing a steady baseline of nutrition that liquid fertilizers simply cannot match. Now, you cannot just grab any random piece of wood from the hardware store and expect this to work. Choosing the right wood is the first critical secret to this method. You absolutely must avoid any pressure-treated lumber, painted wood, or wood that has been stained, because those chemicals will leach into your soil and poison your food. You also want to avoid woods that contain natural antifungal resins like cedar, redwood, or black locust. These woods are great for building fences because they refuse to rot, but we actually want our stake to rot. The best materials are medium to soft hardwoods or rapidly decaying softwoods. Think of applewood, birch, alder, poplar, or untreated pine. If you have recently pruned your fruit trees, those thick branches are absolutely perfect for this. You want a piece of wood that is already slightly aged, maybe something that has been sitting in a pile for a season. This aged wood has already lost its harsh green saps and is primed and ready to act like a sponge. Using the right wood ensures that the biological breakdown happens right on schedule, hitting that magical 60-day window where the soil begins to dramatically shift in texture. The size and shape of your wooden stake are incredibly important for getting that rapid 60-day result. We are not talking about burying a massive tree trunk, but a tiny twig will not do the job either. The ideal stake is roughly the thickness of your wrist, about 3 to 5 inches in diameter, and around 18 to 24 inches long. This specific size is not random. It offers the perfect ratio of surface area to solid mass. If the wood is too thin, it will rot away completely in a week and fail to provide long-term benefits. If it is too thick, the soil microbes will take years to even make a dent in it. You want to sharpen one end of the stake to a rough point using a hatchet or a saw. This point not only makes it easier to drive into hard, compacted clay, but it also creates a wedge that gently pushes the soil aside without destroying the structure. Leaving the bark on is highly recommended. Bark is highly textured and full of tiny crevices. These little cracks are exactly where fungal spores love to hide and germinate. The rougher the stake looks, the faster it will integrate into your garden soil. Placement strategy is where the magic really starts to happen. You do not just stick these stakes anywhere. You have to be strategic, thinking like a plant root. If you are planting heavy feeders like tomatoes, pumpkins, or zucchini, you want to drive the stake into the ground right in the center of where your plants will grow, leaving about 2 inches of the stake poking above the surface. You then plant your seedlings in a circle around the stake, about 8 to 12 inches away from it. This positioning is crucial as the summer heats up and the topsoil dries out. The roots of your vegetables will naturally sense the moisture held inside the rotting wood. They will grow deeply and directly toward the stake, wrapping their roots completely around it. This anchors the plant securely against strong winds and guarantees they have a permanent water source during droughts. For fruit trees or berry bushes, you use a perimeter method. You drive 3 or 4 stakes in a circle right at the drip line of the branches. This encourages the tree roots to spread outward and downward, creating an incredibly resilient root system that can survive even the harshest conditions. Let us talk about the invisible heroes of this whole operation, which are the mycorrhizal fungi. This is where the real mind-blowing science comes into play. Mycorrhizal fungi are microscopic threads that live in the soil and act as an extension of your plant's root system. But these fungi need a home base, and they absolutely love rotting wood. Within the first 2 weeks of driving your stake into the ground, fungal spores in the soil will detect the carbon source and begin to colonize the wood. They will spin a massive web of white threads called mycelium all over the underground portion of the stake. But here is the secret plot twist. These fungi cannot make their own food. They need sugars, which your plants produce through photosynthesis. So, the fungi physically attach themselves to the roots of your tomatoes or peppers. In exchange for some plant sugar, the fungal network acts like a massive pipeline, mining water and trace minerals from deep in the soil and pumping it directly into your plants. The wooden stake becomes the central processing hub for this entire underground economy, making your garden incredibly efficient. If you hate dragging a heavy hose around the garden in the middle of July, this next benefit will change your life. The moisture sponge effect of the wooden stake is the ultimate lazy watering hack. Dead wood is highly porous. When it rains, or when you do your initial spring watering, the water trickles down the side of the stake. Instead of evaporating back into the hot air or running off the hard surface, the water is absorbed deep into the cellular structure of the wood. A single good-sized stake can hold a surprising amount of water. During a dry spell, when the surrounding soil begins to parch, the stake slowly releases this stored moisture back into the earth through simple capillary action. It acts like an ancient natural drip irrigation system. The soil right around the stake stays perfectly damp, cool, and crumbly, while the rest of the yard might be cracking from the heat. This means you can go days or even a full week without watering your raised beds, and your plants will not even wilt. You are essentially banking water underground where the sun cannot steal it from you. So, what actually happens during this magical 60-day timeline? Let us break down the calendar. Days 1 through 14 are all about absorption and colonization. The dry wood soaks up ground moisture and begins to soften. You will not see anything happening above ground, but below the surface, the fungal networks are throwing a massive party. Days 15 through 30 are the activation phase. Earthworms discover the softening wood and begin to congregate around it. Their constant movement creates tunnels. aerating the soil directly around the root zone of your growing seedlings. Days 31 through 45 are the rapid growth phase. By now, your plant roots have reached the stake and tapped into the fungal pipeline. You will notice a sudden, explosive surge in green leafy growth that seems to happen overnight. Finally, by day 60, the transformation is complete. If you were to dig a tiny test hole near the stake, you would find that the once hard, dead clay has turned into dark, crumbly, sweet-smelling loam. The biological engine is fully operational, and your plants are preparing to set a massive amount of fruit. At this point, we need to completely bust a very common gardening myth. If you tell your neighbors you are burying wood next to your vegetables, they will probably tell you that the wood is going to steal all the nitrogen from the soil and turn your plants yellow. This is called nitrogen drawdown, and it is a real thing, but only if you mix hundreds of tiny uncomposted wood chips directly into your topsoil. Tiny chips have a massive collective surface area, so the soil bacteria go crazy trying to break them all down at once, consuming all the available nitrogen in the process. But our 19th-century method uses a single solid stake. Because the stake has a relatively small surface area compared to its mass, the decomposition process is slow, localized, and controlled. The bacteria only work on the very outer millimeter of the wood at any given time. This means the nitrogen drawdown is so minimal that your plants will not even notice it. In fact, because the stake attracts so many earthworms, the nitrogen-rich worm castings completely offset any minor nitrogen loss. The stake gives you all the benefits of carbon without starving your crops. If you want to accelerate this 60-day timeline and get even crazier results, you can use the pre-soaking trick. Before you drive your stake into the garden, do not just put it in dry. Get a 5-gallon bucket and fill it with rainwater. Never use city tap water right out of the hose because the chlorine will kill the microbes we are trying to attract. To this rainwater, add a handful of rich compost or a scoop of worm castings or even a cup of liquid seaweed fertilizer. Let the wooden stake soak in this dark, nutrient-rich tea for about 48 hours. The dry wood will act like a vacuum, sucking the compost tea deep into its core. When you finally drive that soaked stake into your dead soil, it is no longer just a piece of wood. It is a biological time bomb. It is fully loaded with moisture, beneficial bacteria, and immediately available nutrients. This jump-starts the fungal colonization process by at least 2 weeks. Your plants will instantly sense the nutrient gradient in the soil and send their roots racing toward the stake. It is a brilliant way to trick nature into speeding up the recovery of your soil. Let us talk about exactly how to plant around your newly placed stake to maximize your harvest. You want to utilize the concept of companion planting to create a self-sustaining guild. Place your heavy feeder like a massive indeterminate tomato plant right next to the stake on the side that gets the most morning sun. Then, on the shaded side of the stake, plant something that likes cooler roots, like a crisp head of lettuce or some spinach. At the base of the tomato, plant a few basil seeds and a marigold. What happens here is beautiful. The tomato roots dive deep to hug the wooden stake for water. The lettuce acts as a living mulch, shading the soil surface and preventing evaporation. The basil and marigolds confuse pests with their strong scents. All of these plants are tapping into the exact same fungal network connected to that single wooden stake. The fungi actually facilitate communication between the plants. If the tomato gets attacked by aphids, it can send chemical distress signals through the fungal network, prompting the nearby plants to boost their own natural defenses. You are not just planting vegetables. You are building a highly intelligent, interconnected family. There is a hidden thermal benefit to this technique that early spring gardeners are going to absolutely love. When organic matter breaks down, it generates heat. Think about a hot compost pile that steams in the crisp morning air. The same exact process is happening underground with your wooden stake, just on a much smaller, slower scale. As the bacteria and fungi consume the wood fibers, they release tiny amounts of thermal energy. While this will not make the ground hot to the touch, it does raise the ambient temperature of the soil immediately surrounding the stake by just a couple of degrees. This micro-heating effect is massive for early spring planting. It warms up the root zone of your seedlings, protecting them from sudden cold snaps or late frosts. Warm roots mean faster nutrient uptake and quicker establishment. It allows you to safely transplant your peppers and tomatoes a week or two earlier than your neighbors who are planting in cold, flat dirt. By giving your plants this cozy underground heater, you are extending your growing season without having to build complicated plastic greenhouses or cold frames. We need to talk about the workforce you are hiring when you use this stake method. Dead soil is dead because there is nobody living in it. No bugs, no worms, no life. The wooden stake is basically a giant neon sign advertising free food and housing for the best workers in the animal kingdom. Within weeks, you will attract deep-diving earthworms. These are not the little red wigglers from your compost bin, but the big, muscular night crawlers that can dig tunnels several feet deep. As they travel up and down the side of the wooden stake to feed on the decaying matter, they create vertical drainage channels. When it rains heavily, these channels prevent your garden from flooding by directing water deep into the subsoil. You will also attract isopods, commonly known as pill bugs or roly-polies. While people sometimes worry about them eating tender seedlings, their primary job is to shred dead plant matter. They will hang out right at the soil surface where the stake emerges, chewing up fallen leaves and returning them to the soil as instant fertilizer. You are creating a bustling metropolis of free labor that works 24 hours a day. The nutrient slow-release mechanism of this technique is what guarantees your plants will not run out of gas in late August. Most gardeners dump synthetic fertilizer onto their plants in June. The plants grow huge, green, and lush, but then the fertilizer washes away in the rain, and by the time the plant needs to actually grow the heavy fruit, the soil is totally depleted. The wooden stake prevents this boom and bust cycle. Wood is packed with trace minerals that the tree absorbed over years of growth, like calcium, magnesium, and potassium. But these minerals are locked inside the dense carbon structure. As the fungi slowly dissolve the wood over the season, they release these vital trace minerals right when your vegetables need them most, the fruiting stage. Tomatoes need calcium to prevent blossom end rot, and peppers need potassium for thick, heavy walls. The stake provides a constant, perfectly metered dose of these minerals directly to the root zone. Your plants will not experience sudden hunger pangs. They will have consistent, steady energy right up until the very last frost of the autumn season. To make this technique truly invincible, you must combine the underground stake with an above-ground mulching strategy. This creates the ultimate lazy gardener sandwich. Once your stake is in the ground and your plants are settled, you need to cover the bare dirt around them. Leaving soil exposed to the blazing sun is a gardening crime. Take a thick layer of organic matter like pesticide-free straw, dried grass clippings, or shredded fall leaves, and lay it down about 3 inches thick around your plants, making sure it touches the top of the wooden stake. Now, you have a closed-loop system. The top mulch prevents the sun from baking the soil and stops weed seeds from germinating. When it rains, the water filters through the mulch, soaking up nutrients and channels straight down the wooden stake into the root zone. The mulch keeps the top of the stake damp, encouraging decomposition from the top down, while the subsoil moisture rots it from the bottom up. This combination guarantees that the soil temperature remains perfectly stable, cool in the blazing summer, and warm in the chilly nights. It is armor for your garden. Let us do some quick troubleshooting, because not everyone has soft soil to begin with. What if your dirt is so incredibly compacted, so full of clay and rocks, that trying to hammer a wooden stake into the ground feels like hitting a concrete driveway? Do not panic, and do not grab the tiller. We have a simple workaround. You can use a heavy-duty drill with a thick masonry bit or a bulb planting auger. Simply drill a pilot hole straight down into the hard earth, making it slightly narrower than your wooden stake. This removes the hardest material without disturbing the wider soil structure. Then take a heavy mallet and drive your sharpened stake down into the pre-drilled hole. The friction of the wood against the tight clay walls is actually exactly what you want. It ensures tight contact, which is necessary for the fungi to cross over from the wood into the soil. If the soil is terribly dry, water the hole deeply before driving the stake in. This single act of brute force will be the last heavy labor you have to do in that garden bed for the rest of the year. The beauty of this method is not just what happens in the first 60 days, but what happens in year 2 and year 3. Unlike chemical fertilizers that disappear, the wooden stake provides a compounding permanent benefit. By the end of the first season, your stake will likely be soft, spongy, and half its original size. Over the winter, it will continue to break down under the snow. By the second spring, that piece of wood will likely be completely gone. But it does not just vanish. It leaves behind a permanent vertical column of pure, black, rich humus directly in the center of your garden bed. It leaves behind thousands of tiny air pockets and a massive, dormant fungal network just waiting to wake up. When you plant in that exact same spot the next year, you do not need to add another stake. The soil structure has been permanently altered and healed from the inside out. Your new plants will send their roots down the ghost tunnel left by the old stake, finding instant access to deep water and nutrients. You are literally terraforming your backyard one small column at a time. This stake technique is not just for tomatoes and cucumbers. It is an absolute game changer for anyone trying to establish new fruit trees or berry bushes in poor soil. When you buy a bare root apple tree or a blueberry bush, The first year is critical. If the roots cannot penetrate the surrounding hard clay, the plant will become root-bound in its own hole and eventually die. To prevent this, when you dig your planting hole, drive 3 or 4 wooden stakes horizontally or at a sharp downward angle right into the sidewalls of the hole, pointing outward into the yard. Then plant your tree in the center. As these stakes break down over the next year, they create soft, spongy tunnels of least resistance leading out into the hard clay. The tree roots will instinctively follow these damp, rotting paths of wood straight out into the wider yard. It is like building a custom highway system for your orchard. This ensures your trees develop a wide, deep anchor system, making them highly drought-resistant and capable of producing massive yields of fruit for decades to come, all thanks to a few pieces of scrap wood. If you are familiar with permaculture, you might be thinking that this sounds a lot like hugelkultur, and you are absolutely right. But this is the highly adapted, lazy gardener's microversion. Traditional hugelkultur involves digging massive trenches, burying whole fallen trees, piling on tons of soil, and creating hills that can be 6 feet tall. It is incredibly effective, but it requires heavy machinery, a massive amount of space, and weeks of back-breaking labor. The 19th-century wooden stake method takes the exact same brilliant biological principles, moisture retention, fungal dominance, and slow carbon release, and shrinks it down to the individual plant level. It is hugelkultur on a micro scale. It allows urban gardeners with small raised beds or people with limited physical mobility to achieve the exact same soil-building magic without ever having to lift a shovel. It is elegant, it is targeted, and it is highly efficient. Why rebuild the entire forest floor when you can just build a perfect microclimate right exactly where your tomato plant needs it most? Let us walk through a real-world example so you can confidently do this tomorrow. Imagine you have a 4 by 8 foot raised bed filled with old, dusty, exhausted soil from last year. Step 1. You find 6 nice pieces of hardwood branch, about 2 feet long and 2 inches thick, and sharpen one end. Step 2. You soak them overnight in a bucket of water with a handful of compost. Step 3. Space them evenly down the center of your raised bed and hammer them in until only 2 inches remain above the dirt. Step 4. Plant your tomato or pepper seedlings in a zigzag pattern around the stakes. Step 5. Cover the entire surface of the bed with 3 inches of clean straw mulch, making sure to tuck it right up against the wooden pegs. Finally, give the bed one deep soaking watering. That is it. Your physical work is completely done. Over the next 60 days, you will watch in amazement as the soil color darkens, the earthworms move in, and your plants explode with vibrant green growth. You have just built an automated underground feeding system that will reward you with baskets of fresh produce. And there you have it, the brilliantly lazy 19th century secret to reviving dead soil. The biggest plot twist in gardening is realizing that you do not actually have to feed your plants at all. If you simply provide the right environment, like a damp piece of rotting wood, the soil web will wake up and do all the feeding, watering, and aerating for you. By driving a single stake into the ground, you are stopping the cycle of tilling and destroying, and you are starting a cycle of healing and incredible abundance. A little bit of smart preparation in the spring will save you hundreds of hours of desperate watering in the scorching summer heat. I really hope you give this forgotten technique a try this season. If you found this information helpful, please hit that subscribe button and give the video a like so we can keep bringing you more lazy gardening secrets. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever accidentally left wood in your garden and noticed plants growing wildly around it? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy planting.